Doctors said she was mentally ill. The church said she was possessed. She died during an exorcism. In the quiet German village of Klingenberg am Main, life moved to the rhythm of church bells and tradition. Snow would blanket the rooftops in winter, muffling the sounds of a community where faith was the bedrock of existence. It was here, on September 21st, 1952, that Anneliese Michel was born. She was the eldest daughter in a devoutly Catholic family. Her parents, Joseph and Anna, believed that suffering was a path to God. Discipline and devotion weren't seen as burdens, but as sacred duties. Anneliese grew up prayerful and obedient, a quiet girl who never questioned, never rebelled. She simply prayed. By the time she was 12, she was already fasting in private, offering her hunger as a sacrifice. Her rosary was a constant companion. Teachers called her intelligent. Friends found her kind, but distant. Then, in 1968, when Anneliese was 16, her world shattered. She collapsed at school without any warning. Her body went rigid, seized by convulsions. When she finally came to, she was disoriented, unable to speak. The diagnosis came back from the doctors: temporal lobe epilepsy. They prescribed anticonvulsant medication, hoping to manage the episodes. But the seizures didn't stop. In fact, her condition began to spiral in a new, terrifying direction. She started hearing voices. Not her own thoughts, but distinct, unfamiliar voices that grew from whispers into hostile, mocking condemnations. She saw dark figures lurking in the corners of her vision and felt a constant, crushing sense of dread. Doctors believed it was psychosis, a symptom of her epilepsy. They adjusted her medication, increased the dosage, tried everything they knew. Nothing worked. By 1970, Anneliese developed a severe aversion to anything religious. The sight of a church made her physically ill. Holy images sent her into a panic. At home, her behavior became erratic. Her own voice would sometimes shift in tone and cadence, becoming unrecognizable. She dropped out of school as her health rapidly deteriorated. Her desperate family sought help from every corner of the medical world: psychiatrists, neurologists, specialized clinics across Bavaria. The diagnosis never changed: severe mental illness. But Anneliese and her parents were convinced it was something else entirely, something the medical world couldn't explain. So they turned to the one place they had left, the church. Father Ernst Alt, a priest with a background in spiritual counseling, agreed to visit the Michel home. What he saw there shook him to his core. Anneliese was physically frail but mentally volatile, swinging between moments of calm lucidity and sudden, unexplainable aggression. He claimed she sometimes spoke in languages she'd never learned and reacted with extreme violence to sacred prayers. Father Alt became convinced this was a case for spiritual intervention. He formally petitioned the Diocese of Würzburg for an exorcism. The church was hesitant. A formal exorcism was a rare and serious matter, only approved under the strictest of conditions after extensive psychological evaluations. As the months of deliberation dragged on, Anneliese's condition grew worse and worse. Finally, in 1975, the Bishop of Würzburg granted conditional approval for the Roman rite of exorcism. The first ritual took place on September 24th, inside the Michel family home. But this wasn't a single ceremony. It was the beginning of a grueling 10-month ordeal. Over 67 separate exorcisms were performed on Anneliese Michel, and the sessions were recorded on audio tape. During these rites, Anneliese's reactions were reportedly violent. Her voice would shift between distinct personalities, with each claiming to be a different entity. Some were historical figures associated with sin and evil. As the spiritual battle raged, her physical body withered. Anneliese began refusing food, convinced that her starvation and suffering held a redemptive purpose. She spent countless hours kneeling in prayer, continuing until her knee joints were permanently damaged from the strain. By early 1976, she was severely malnourished and weak. Father Alt wrote letters to church officials, warning them that her health was failing. Medical intervention was discussed, but for reasons that remain debated, it was never enforced. The exorcisms continued. Through it all, Anneliese herself seemed caught between two worlds. At times, she was lucid and terrified. At others, she was completely unrecognizable, insisting her suffering was a chosen sacrifice to atone for the sins of others. The final exorcism was conducted on June 30th, 1976. The next morning, Anneliese Michel was found dead in her bed. She was 23 years old. The official cause of death was malnutrition and dehydration. An immediate police investigation was launched. Prosecutors listened to the chilling audio recordings, reviewed the medical records, and took witness testimony. They came to a grim conclusion. Anneliese could have been saved with proper medical care. In 1978, her parents and both priests, Father Alt and Father Arnold Renz, were charged with negligent homicide. The trial became a media spectacle, capturing national and international attention. It pitted modern medicine against ancient faith in a public courtroom. The defense argued that Anneliese had refused medical treatment of her own free will, and that the Church itself had validated her condition as spiritual possession. The prosecution argued that blind faith had tragically replaced necessary medical care with fatal consequences. In the end, all four were found guilty. Their sentences, however, were reduced to probation. No one served any prison time. The Catholic Church acknowledged the tragedy, but stopped short of accepting formal responsibility. In the years that followed, the practice of exorcism was quietly discouraged throughout Germany. But the story was far from over. The audio tapes from the exorcisms were leaked and circulated, fueling an intense debate that continues to this day. To some, Anneliese Michel is a tragic symbol of untreated mental illness and religious extremism. To others, she is a martyr, a young woman who willingly endured unimaginable suffering for a higher spiritual purpose. Her grave in Klingenberg became an unofficial pilgrimage site. Visitors left candles, notes, and whispered prayers. Years after her death, her body was exhumed at the request of religious authorities. The official report stated her remains showed normal signs of decomposition, but rumors whispered of a different finding, that her body was incorrupt. No photographs were ever released to the public. To this day, there is no consensus on what truly happened to Anneliese Michel. Was she a profoundly ill young woman, let down by a medical system that could unhelp her and consumed by the fervent beliefs of those around her? Or was she the victim of something else, something unseen, caught in a terrifying crossroads between faith and fear? Science offers its explanations. Faith offers its meaning. Neither provides absolute certainty. What remains undeniable is this: a young woman suffered terribly and for years. Her pain was witnessed, recorded, and debated by the entire world. And in the end, no one saved her. Anneliese Michel wasn't just a symbol, a cautionary tale, or a legend. She was a person, and her story leaves us with a haunting question that echoes through the decades. Where does belief end, and where does our responsibility to one another begin? Thanks for watching. If you found this story compelling, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into the unexplained.